All essays respond to a particular question or issue. In some ways, all essays are persuasive text because you're trying to convince your reader that you have the right answer to the question. The question we are dealing with is this: how do the authors of The Road, The Lottery, The Telltale Heart, The Black Cat, and The Yellow Wallpaper use Gothic techniques and conventions to create a sense of fear or unease in the reader? That's a big question to get your head around, but we can simplify it by turning the question into a hypothesis. The question asks you to think about three things: the text, Gothic techniques, fear or unease in the reader, and that's it. There's not much we can do about the third one. In this essay, you have to talk about fear and unease no matter what, but we'll come back to that later. You will have space to write about no more than 3 texts and no more than 3 techniques. So if you're stuck, simply pick the 3 texts that you understand the best and a technique that links them all together and start writing. For example, you could plan a basic essay like so, with your techniques and texts laid out, writing one paragraph, matching a technique to its respective text, and you can mix and match as much as you want. Let's try another example. You might like to write about the black cat, the yellow wallpaper, and the telltale heart. There's a pretty obvious link between these 3: extreme emotion, especially madness. So now you have a hypothesis. The authors of the black cat, the yellow wallpaper, and the telltale heart all use a range of Gothic techniques, such as the depiction of extreme emotion, to create a sense of fear or unease in their readers. And guess what? That hypothesis is also an opening sentence. All it does is recycle some phrases from the original essay question. If you want to be more original, you can break it down into parts and swap bits out. So you might, for example, change to create to induce or to instill. You can have a bit of a play around with synonyms, but the essential structure can remain the same. Is that a complete introduction? In some ways, yes. If you were writing a 400-word essay, it might be long enough, but you have a bit more room to spread out here, so you should elaborate. Give your reader a little taste of what each of your main body paragraphs is going to be about. So you might write, in The Telltale Heart, Edgar Allan Poe switches rapidly back and forward between happiness and despair in order to give the reader a sense of the protagonist's unbalanced state of mind. Similarly, passion and violence set the mood of the black cat. Meanwhile, Charlotte Perkins Gilman invites readers to share her protagonist's despair. This essay will examine how each of these stories make different use of extreme emotions to unsettle their readers. Now that introduction is 109 words long and tells the reader everything they could possibly want to know about what to expect from the rest of the essay. Notice also the use of comparative words: similarly, meanwhile, in comparison, in contrast, etc. These words help with the transition from one sentence to another and from one idea to another. Once your introduction is written, you're halfway there. If you have a solid introduction that clearly states what's going to happen in the rest of the essay, then you have something to refer back to if you get lost. You can't go wrong if you just keep referring back to the essay question and the first sentence of your introduction. Here's a refresher. The authors of The Black Cat, The Yellow Wallpaper, and The Telltale Heart all use a range of Gothic techniques, such as the depiction of extreme emotion, to create a sense of fear or unease in their readers. That's the first sentence of your introduction, the first sentence of your entire essay. It's time to write the topic sentence of your first body paragraph. A sentence is a kind of formula, and as long as we have seen, it's okay to substitute some terms. So if we decide to write our first paragraph about the black cat, we can reuse parts of our original hypothesis, like so. So you're introducing the story and the author. You're specifying which techniques your essay is about, and you must include the key phrase to make the readers feel anxious or uncertain, or some combination of synonyms. So your topic sentence becomes, in The Telltale Heart, Edgar Allan Poe uses depictions of extreme emotion, especially madness, to make his readers feel anxious and uncertain. And in this instance, anxious and uncertain is just the same as saying fear and unease. It's just swapping some synonyms out. And that's the T in teal. Your topic sentence is done. The elaboration in teal does not necessarily need to be long. 1 or 2 sentences is usually enough. We've started this paragraph by saying that there are definitely some depictions of extreme emotion in The Telltale Heart. As we go through the paragraph, we're going to get more and more specific about what we mean. So, in The Telltale Heart, Edgar Allan Poe uses depictions of extreme emotion, especially madness, to make his readers feel anxious and uncertain. That's our topic sentence. He achieves this effect by constantly changing the protagonist's response to his environment. Sometimes he is ecstatically happy, and sometimes he is terrified. This is the time to introduce some evidence. You can say that the protagonist's emotional state is constantly changing. It's true, but providing direct evidence will make any argument more convincing. And again, remember, this essay is a kind of persuasive text, so the more evidence you have, the better it will be. When you introduce evidence, it's important to avoid simply plonking it in without any context. We're talking about extreme emotional states in this paragraph. So to support the argument, we're going to need excerpts from the text that show extreme emotions at both ends of the spectrum. How about these? To demonstrate anger, hatred, and terror, the first one there. And to demonstrate the opposite of anger, hatred, and terror, extreme happiness, a second quote from slightly down the page. Now we notice that in this second quote there are some ellipses that look like this. These indicate that bits have been trimmed from the quote. You don't usually have to have this, but sometimes it is necessary to trim some irrelevant parts of a long piece of text. Remember, you don't want to plonk in more than 10 or 15 word quotes because you're wasting your word count. So how would these quotes look if we simply chucked them into the paragraph? Well, they'd look something like this. Read that paragraph through. It's kind of jarring to simply read the quotes by themselves. Remember that quotes aren't really evidence unless you tell the reader how they are evidence. Now let's look at this paragraph again, but this time let's insert some information about why we've chosen these quotes to support the central idea. In The Telltale Heart, Edgar Allan Poe uses depictions of extreme emotion, especially madness, to make his readers feel anxious and uncertain. He achieves this effect by constantly changing the protagonist's response to his environment. Sometimes he is ecstatically happy, and sometimes he is terrified. In the moment just before he kills the old man, the protagonist is driven mad with rage when he hears his victim's pulse. He writes, "It was the beating of the old man's heart. It increased my fury as the beating of a drum stimulates the soldier into courage." This demonstrates one emotional extreme, an anger great enough to drive someone to commit murder. But then once the killing is done, and he has hidden the body, the protagonist expresses a different kind of extreme emotion, saying, "I smiled in the enthusiasm of my confidence, in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph." This is a rapid shift from rage to glee. Now we have both our evidence and our explanation. Notice that each quote has an explanatory sentence before and after it. You don't necessarily have to bookend every piece of evidence like this, but it can be useful. Notice also that each quote is preceded by a phrase like, "he says," "he writes," "Poe writes," "the author writes," "Poe says," or "the author says," or something to that effect. By doing this, you give whoever is reading your essay more of a sense that you have carefully chosen your quotes and have thought about how to integrate them into your paragraph. Now it's time to write the L in teal, your linking sentence. We've talked a lot about how Poe uses extreme emotions as a Gothic technique, but we're missing a crucial piece of information. Let's refer back to the first sentence of the intro again. The authors of The Black Cat, Yellow Wallpaper, and The Telltale Heart all use a range of Gothic techniques, such as the depiction of extreme emotion, to create a sense of fear or unease in their readers. Notice how that last phrase is in bold. No matter what your essay is about, you should always be talking about how your chosen techniques and your chosen stories create a sense of fear or unease in the reader. Essentially, we are asking, what decisions did the author make when creating the text? And when making those decisions, how did he or she intend to make the reader feel? So we need a final sentence that links the topic of this paragraph back to the overall essay topic. All you need to do is, firstly, sum up what you've written, and secondly, remind us that you are talking about fear and unease. Instead of fear and unease, we'll use the phrase uncertainty and anxiety, which is just a more original way of saying the exact same thing. By contrasting anger with elation, Poe uses the Gothic convention of emotional extremes to throw his reader off balance and increase their sense of uncertainty and anxiety. Now, you don't necessarily need that part about Poe trying to throw his reader off balance, but a good essay will always be as specific as possible about what fear and unease specifically looks like. Each of these stories produces a sense of fear and unease, but they all do it in different ways. It helps the argument of your essay to make the link between the techniques and the sense of fear and unease that you're talking about. So now our paragraph is complete. As you can see here, it has a topic sentence that tells the reader what the paragraph will be about. It has a linking sentence to expand on the idea and give us a little segue into the evidence. And when introducing evidence, it makes sure to contextualize it, telling you why each particular piece of evidence is important and how it fits in with your overall argument. And finally, it ends with a linking sentence that connects the idea in this paragraph back with the overall idea of Gothic literature creating fear and unease in the reader. That's 186 words, incidentally, and in that paragraph you've got everything you need. Now you just need to repeat the process twice more, once for each of the other two key ideas you've outlined in your introduction. Remember that if you have a clear topic sentence and each paragraph ends with a linking sentence that mentions fear and unease or something similar, you can't go wrong. Finally, writing a conclusion. A conclusion is just an introduction in reverse. Remember again that this essay is only 800 words long, so you shouldn't need more than 100 words for your conclusion. Start by restating your hypothesis. In this case, we will say, the authors of The Black Cat, The Telltale Heart, and The Yellow Wallpaper all portray extreme emotions as a way of instilling fear and unease in their readers. Simple as that. Now we need to recap exactly how this happens. To do this, we will write a very brief summary of each of the three main paragraphs, one sentence or less for each one. In The Telltale Heart, Poe's protagonist swings between extremes of joy and despair, while in The Black Cat, the narrator sinks deeper into depression, alcoholism, and irrationality. Similarly, The Yellow Wallpaper portrays a character whose decaying emotional state merges with the decayed environment. That's it. 2 sentences summarizing 3 paragraphs in the body of the essay. That's all you need. Now all that's left is to write a closing sentence that sums up your overall approach to the essay. Each of these approaches helps us to understand the content of the stories by forcing the reader to share the main character's emotional experiences. Now you could go into more depth if you want, but this kind of final sentence just assures the reader that you've understood the purpose of your own essay. Now you have a complete conclusion. 98 words.